Okay, so from here, I've got my colored layers. I do want to add one darker, slightly darker green to give it a little bit more of a punch. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a low opacity brush, kind of a harder edge. Not that bad looking. And then just give it a little bit of depth right there. From now, what I could do is I could go back in and then give this some texture. And to do that, it's going to be a little bit tricky. What I want to first do is take my only unused layer that I have nothing on, set it above everything else, and make sure the eyeball is on. There's another fancy filter you can use. It's called Render Difference Clouds. If I do this, oh, sorry, let me go ahead and render regular clouds. It takes it and fills it with a big mess of color. It uses my two variations here, the foreground and the background color, and all it does is it generates a random map of that. So it says, oh, well, I'm just going to fill this with whatever I feel like. If I do the same thing again, it should not be the same. Randomly generated pattern every single time. If I choose two different colors, white and black. Come on. There we go. Okay, come on. And difference clouds, you can see that this becomes something very similar to what we're used to looking at. This is a grayscale version of a gradient map. If you wanted to, what you could do is you could pick a channel out and you can displace map this, but I don't really feel like it. That's too much work. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just change it to one of the color blending modes that actually looks a little bit better, like overlay. And then I'll tweak the opacity back just a bit so it gives it that texture that it didn't have initially. Now what I could do is if I want to have it only on the sky, I could make a selection of the layer that I already have, apply mask. So that texture is only out there, but it's not on anything else. If I wanted to invert that, I could just select my mask, push Control I. And you can see that the cactus gets that texture as opposed to everything else. It's a fancy, funky way of adding in just randomized effects to an image without very much work. What I do want to do, though, is I want to add a little bit of noise and a little bit of texture into that cactus. So I'm going to invert it, and then I'm going to jump over to this layer. And I'm just going to... My control isn't working today, which is frustrating. Go to my curves. And you can see as I change the curves on this, it affects the way that the colors are blending together. So I'm just going to find whatever looks aesthetically the most pleasing to me. Right about there, and call it. Anything else you would do to this? Anybody? Nothing? It's a pretty simplistic image, but uses a couple of techniques to apply the layers. Primarily, if you look at each one of these individually, this is a overlaid 58%. I mean, I guess I could go back in and change the opacity of this if I wanted to, but that's a little bit much. I like the texture and I like the look that that gives. It's close to what I was going for initially. So I've used my layer mask, I've used layer manipulation. I haven't distorted any layers, but you know, I'm okay with that. I don't really need to. If I wanted to, I could select all and transform somehow, or let my machine die and then hope that it doesn't crash. There we go. If I want to give it a little bit of scale, yep, you can manipulate anything with a transform tool. It's really quite nice. So if you want to give it that little scale and kind of a little bit of background, do it like that, and just drop it back so it's not so in your face about it. Or, you know what, we can use our layer mask and then erase out the parts that we don't want. So I'm just going to use a feathered brush. And you can see that it's slowly just kind of fading out into the background there. Gives it that little nice touch, little accent to the image, but not enough to, you know, take over it. So that is pretty much the tutorial on how to use, you know, the paintbrush in Photoshop. Your layer modes, importantly, are should be set to blend. Sorry, your blending modes should be set to multiply to get that kind of overlay feel to it. If you don't have them set to multiply, you're not going to get the same kind of effect. What they're going to do is they're going to sit on top of the darker areas and make them look as if they're in a cloud. Multiply forces the dark stuff to come through, and you'll be good to go after that. So, using layer masks, blending modes, and a myriad of other things to do a watercolor painted effect on this image. Hope you enjoyed it.